The McGil Method is one of the most well-known approaches to spine health and low back pain. But many people are getting it wrong. So today we're going to clear up that confusion. We're going to look at what the McGil Method actually is. We're going to look at neutral spine, bracing the abdominals, and most importantly, the McGil Big Three. So if you're following McGil, if you're looking into the McGil Method, then this episode is for you. Firstly, what is the McGil Method? Most people misunderstand it and call it the Big Three, which is just a tool that sits upon a shelf here, and as a therapist, practitioner, whatever you want to call it, trainer, we would choose that tool if it was so required. So the McGil Method it's a process of assessment, and it's also a way of thinking about a problem and how to solve a problem as well. So when it comes to the low back, what we're trying to understand is essentially what's triggering the pain, or enhancing it, or aggravating it, and what's relieving the pain or reducing it. They're essentially the two things that are being looked for. So the movements, the postures, the positions, and the loads that are doing either of those two things, making it more painful or less painful. So that's sort of like the first part. What's also happening is we're trying to understand where the pain is coming from. Now, if you look at the book behind me here, that's got a selection of physical assessments. Or a part of the book is going through the physical assessments. A big part of it is the anatomy that leads into why we do those ones, and how we go about interpreting the tests as well. So we look at the spine, and we look at different structures of the spine. Is it the disc? Is it the facet joint? Is it instability? So we look at those different things and try and identify which one it is, because if it's one of them, it requires a certain path of rehabilitation. If it's another one, it requires a certain path, and if it's a combination of them, it requires a certain path. So we have to come to that understanding first. There is also a consultation and question answering process to it as well. So it starts off with the question answering process, or the questions and the consultation. So we gain information. That's essentially what we're doing. Through those questions and answers, we're gaining information. Then through the physical assessments, we gain information. What we're able to do is cross-reference them and find a pattern. Once we start finding that pattern, that then develops our working hypothesis. So when we do the question and answers in the consultation, you start to get an idea of, I think this is happening in the spine. You don't necessarily say that straight away, but you start getting an idea, okay, this is a pattern, this is starting to happen, I think it's coming from here. We then do the physical assessment. That then helps again cross-reference with the consultation. Okay, this is backing up what I thought originally. Or, okay, this isn't backing up what I thought originally. Maybe it's this other option that I thought. So you may have three options to start with. You go into the physical assessment. Okay, it's looking like it's more A than B, or it's more A and B than it is C. So I'm going to get rid of C and I'm going to focus on A and B. So it's a way of thinking, but it's the process. So the questions and answers, the assessments that help you think that way. And what that does is that builds that is essentially a working hypothesis, which is how he starts the book. So he talks about a working hypothesis and how to think about rehabilitation, because what it's not is, I've got low back pain, which is an umbrella term anyway, therefore my core is weak, I need to strengthen it. That is as far as some people go with regards to low back pain rehabilitation, whereas that's not really how it works, because like I said, the McGil Big 3, which is 3 exercises. So what a lot of people do is go, oh, McGil says do the big 3. So do these 3 exercises and that will reduce your pain. That's not the case. That can happen for a particular type of back pain. So if you went through the consultation and assessment and it came out that there was instability in the spine, then the McGil Big 3 is a useful tool to use. We would pull that in and we would assess using it, because the assessment never stops. You don't just do the big 3 and then it's done. It's like, oh, I'm doing the big 3, now it's done. It's like, no. Start doing the big 3, continue assessing. How does that feel? When do you feel it? Is there anything still there? Has it reduced? Has it increased? When does it reduce? When does it increase? All those different types of things. So that's what we're trying to build. And that's how the working hypothesis works. You never stop that thinking process. So you're always continually assessing. If you want to do anything like this, click the link below, go through to my How to Overcome Lower Back Pain workshops. It's the prerequisite to the group coaching. So it talks a little bit more in depth what I'm talking about now, but also we give you some practicals, because it is a standalone course as well. It's not just the prerequisite. So it does give you a basis to actually start this work. But what it's there to do is give you a better understanding of the process, of how to think, of how to or what to look for within your lower back. And then if you so choose, you can go through to the group coaching, which is where we actually focus on you and let's start solving your lower back pain specific to you, not just in a generic fashion. But you can start that process with those workshops. So click the link below, you can go through and you can download those, and you can get started on your journey. And then if you so wish, you can join me for the group coaching. But to summarize what we've talked about so far, what is the McGil Method? It's not the big 3, that's a tool. The McGil Method is an assessment process where we build a working hypothesis, where we're able to look at the postures, the positions, the movements and the loads that are aggravating pain and also reducing pain. So what we can then do is start choosing the tools to be able to sort that out. But the assessment process doesn't stop even when we're into rehabilitation. Now let's look at some facts about neutral spine. We're going to look at them for people with a pain-free back, and we're going to look at them for a painful back as well, because there are different rules for each of them. A lot of people get stuck in this idea that if someone says neutral spine, they're saying you need to walk around like a robot 24/7 for the rest of your life. That's not the case. That's a huge misunderstanding. I understand how the spine works. I've studied it for 17 years, so I have a decent understanding. What we need to understand is the context and the nuance of when it's being used and how it's being used. So, first of all, what is a neutral spine? A lot of people can't define what a neutral spine is. All they think it's, oh, I'm bolt upright and I can't move. That's a neutral spine. It's like, no. That's not a neutral spine. A neutral spine is what's known as elastic equilibrium, which is essentially the tissues all around it are sort of equal, if you will. There's equal stretch and tension within them. And so as the example, when you flex, so when you bend over, the ligaments and the muscles at the back, they stretch to sort of allow the spine to move, and let's just say the muscles at the front and the ligaments at the front, the muscles will contract, and the ligament will sort of just fold, if you will, because it's not necessarily an active tissue. So that is where you would get a disequilibrium. So the muscles have greater stretch at the back and greater tension at the front, and then if you extend, the reverse happens. So there's your elastic disequilibrium. When you go into neutral, it's equal. Front, back, left, right, all the way around, 360 degrees, whatever. So that's essentially what a neutral spine is. Now, if we look at it from a pain-free back perspective, what we have here is we have a greater license to essentially do what we like with our spine. We can bend, we can twist, we can do whatever we want. What I would recommend, however, is when lifting extremely heavy weights, it's more advantageous to maintain a neutral spine. Now again, there are levels to this. So neutral spine, brace torso. That's going to be your most effective way of lifting a big heavy weight. If that's not possible, you would flex a little bit, because this is something people who do strongman events complain about all the time. Yeah, but you can't lift Atlas stones. If you flex the spine, brace the abdominals, lock it in position, again, that will go some way to distributing load around it, which is what I'm going to talk about in a second. The worst thing you can do is go through a flexion and extension cycle under huge load. That has been shown and will continue to be shown as a way of damaging the spine. UK Strength and Conditioning Association have highlighted that. Many other journals, professionals, whatever you want to call them, they've highlighted that. It's in textbooks. Go look it up. So what we need to be able to do is, again, understand that context. So when we've got a painful back, we've got more rules and more license to do what we like, but there are rules that are more advantageous to follow. You don't have to follow them. That's absolutely fine. There are mechanisms that do help the spine recover, but if you're training in a certain way that doesn't allow the spine to recover, then it's going to cause a problem. So when we talk about people with a painful spine, essentially there are more rules about what that person needs to do. And if we use the example first, so I'll sit with someone and I'll go through the questionnaire and they'll tell me, and this is just one aspect, there is more than this, but let's just go with this for now. They'll tell me that when they sit down, their back gets painful. So in my head, I'm thinking, right, most people sit slouched, and it comes on after 10 minutes. Okay, so flexion is a problem for them. Okay, let's go into the assessment. Let's test it. So let's test the neutral spine and let's test the flex spine. So if we test the flex spine and it produces pain, and we test the neutral spine and it doesn't, again, that's me cross-referencing and going, well, they've said this. Okay, my working hypothesis, I think flexion's a problem. Okay, let's go and test it. It's shown to be a problem. Okay, we've got cross-reference, we've got information. There may be other information around it as well from other questions and other assessments which back it up as well. But essentially, we've got the questions, we've got the assessment, it's showing that flexion's a problem. We need to create an environment where they don't flex as much. And that's not to say they should never flex. It just means we want to try and manage how much they flex. And again, when they're lifting, there's going to be more rules when lifting and things like that. So we need to have that understanding that a painful back has different rules to a pain-free back. A painful back has more rules about what we can do. Now, with that said, if in the initial stages it's painful, that doesn't mean we need to stick to it forever. Because if we go through a process of managing the posture of the spine and then we retest in 3 months and all that's gone, okay, let's start slacking off on the rules and letting you do a little bit more with your spine and this, that and the other. And then we test again and we can take away some more of the rules, and then in another 3 months time it's like, okay, we're fine, go and use your spine. There is a caveat to that. The biggest marker of injury is previous injury. So if you've had a back problem in the past, you're more likely to have a back problem in the future. That is just one of the markers, again, that has been shown, that has been studied, that's been understood. Go and look it up if you need to. So it's very much having that understanding and not being rigid in your thinking in neutral spine is a bad thing, neutral spine is a good thing. Neutral spine is a thing that can be used advantageously and disadvantageously. We just need to understand the rules in which we need to be able to use it. So again, it's been misunderstood, But if you have any questions about it, when you should be using it, how you should be using it, how long you've been using it, do I need to change it, stick it down in the comment section below, and I'll see what I can do to get that answered. Again, if you want to start working through this to understand this even more, hit the link in the description, go through the workshops, and start learning a little bit more about what I'm talking about. Part 3 is the misunderstandings around bracing. Bracing, again, has been associated with neutral spine, and the idea that you need to walk around like a robot with a 100% full brace of your abdominals, and that's going to be helpful to your spine, to your low back pain. What I'm going to do in this part is talk about some of the context about when bracing's good and when bracing's bad, and again coming to some sort of understanding about when and how to use it. So first of all, what is bracing? Bracing is essentially the activation of the muscles of the abdominal wall, the rectus abdominis at the front, the obliques at the, let's just say, the sides. What is it meant to do? It's meant to stabilize the spine. So what does stabilize the spine mean? You've got 5 lumbar vertebrae that sit on top of each other. There is no bony structure like the rib cage holding them in place, giving them stability. That's required by the muscles. So the muscles are there to stabilize the spine. So when you activate the abdominal wall, that puts tension on, like guy wires on a tent, like the ropes of a sail. It anchors the spine to the pelvis, essentially. Gives it stability. Now, when a brace is useful, I guess I'll do first, and then when is it not useful? They're kind of tied together, essentially. So when is it useful? One is heavy lifting. So if we're lifting something heavy, and by heavy is all to do with the spine that's lifting it. So if there's a deconditioned spine, something is going to be heavy for one person and light for another. Because if you've got a power lifter who's just going to go and lift a box up off the floor at his house and move it across the kitchen or whatever, then he's probably not going to need to brace that. But if you've got just a regular person who's got a deconditioned spine and they've got to lift a heavy box up, they're going to require more of a brace than the person who's the power lifter. So I guess that's sort of the first thing, is the individual that is doing the lifting. It's what's heavy to them. So that's the first thing. So we would brace. Now, we would brace appropriately. Now, for the person that does the powerlifting, if it's a heavy enough box, they may need to just brace lightly. You know, they can lift a 200 kilo deadlift, let's say. But let's say it's a 50 kilo object, a big flower pot, whatever, I don't know. It may be a relatively simple weight for them to move, but they do need to think about it, and it's like, okay, I just need to, I need to brace a bit. They're not going to go over and just be very casual about it, is what I'm trying to say. They may need to do something. But let's just take this deconditioned person. They've got to move the same flower pot. They may need to really tuck in, get tight, and use a bit of brute force to move it. Whereas the powerlifter is just like, oh, I just got to activate these muscles and get this thing moved. It's not a huge problem. So again, we've got those individual differences. We're also understanding that there is an appropriateness to the brace. There is a heavy brace and there is a light brace. And again, that depends on the individual, because it depends what's heavy for the individual. We know it's going to stabilize the spine. Again, if someone's got pain, then again, there's another set of rules. So like I talked about with neutral spine, there are rules for each type of person doing the lifting, if you will. So the brace will be sort of required in a different way for different people. Again, depending on the individual, slow, controlled movement. For the deconditioned person, for the person with back pain, you're going to require more slow, controlled movement. Because what you're able to then do is think through the movement as you're doing it. If you've got someone who's very conditioned, very strong, they aren't going to need to think through it so much, because They can do 200 kilos, 300 kilos, 400 kilos, whatever it is. They can do that. Their mind is very well attuned to it. Their body is very well attuned to it. Therefore, that works. So, slow and controlled movements, certainly to start with, depending on the spine that's lifting and depending on the object that is being lifted, be it a lightish box or a heavyish plant pot full of soil and potentially a plant in there as well, adding to the weight. So we've got that slow and controlled movement. Now, with regards to pain, when is it useful and when is it not useful? Again, if we went through a consultation and an assessment and we started learning about the pain and it started to come out that compression was a problem for the spine. So what we may find is when we test the brace, it may enhance the pain. Because what's essentially happening, when you tense the muscles around the spine, if you can imagine I'm holding onto a sponge here and I'm squeezing it with my fist. That's essentially what's happening around the spine. It's known as compression around the spine. There's axial compression, which is the squashing of it from top and bottom. And then there's like a cylindrical compression, if you will, where you sort of, the muscles wrap around it and they essentially crush it. Now, if that is a trigger, then it's probably not going to be advantageous to use a brace. So we may need to manage how that is braced. We may need to manage how much the individual lifts with regards to load. So they may require someone to help them to be able to lift an object so we can half the load, or if we get a couple of people to half it, sort of third the load that they're lifting. Because their spine can't deal with the compression required for a heavy brace. Now again, like the neutral spine, that doesn't mean that it's going to be the same forever. Because as the spine conditions, after 3 months we retest. Okay, we can cope with a little bit more. Okay, let's lift a little bit more. Again, another 3 months. Okay, we can cope with it, we can brace, we can do everything. We can heavy brace, we can heavy lift now. So we don't need to do it over time. We use the assessment and the consultation to be able to know when to use something and when not to use something. Because like the big three, the neutral spine and the brace, they're all tools that can be used. They sit up on a shelf, and when we require them, we pull them off the shelf and we implement them. And then when we don't need them, we take them back off the individual and put them back up on the shelf. So we need to understand rehabilitation from this perspective. Again, not going down this 4 exercises, do them, your back pain gets better. 4 stretches, do them, your back pain gets better. Or I've got back pain, strengthen your core. It's not that simple. What we need to understand is a more in-depth knowledge understanding, or we need to have a more in-depth knowledge of understanding so we can actually go and deal with it. If you want to watch more content like this, hit the subscribe button below, and you'll get sent more content like this if you're enjoying it. And again, if you're enjoying it, hit the like button as well. But when it comes to a brace, what is it? It's the activation of the abdominal wall. Why do we use it? To stabilize the spine. Is it useful for everyone? Not always. It depends on the spine. If it's painful when we brace, or it increases the pain, then it's probably not advantageous to completely use it. But we do need to enhance the ability to do it, which means it changes over time. When we might use it might be during heavy lifting, but again, that depends on the individual. Now for the big one, the big 3. This is where most people misunderstand what they're for. So what most people think is they will reduce their pain, because again, they've gone down this road of exercise reduces pain. It doesn't always, but it can. It just depends on the spine that it's being used for. So when does the big 3 reduce pain? If we were in a consultation and an assessment and it became very clear that there was instability in the spine, and that instability was increasing the risk of pain. What the big three are able to do, they are able, because the muscles become more active, they are able to stabilize the vertebra of the spine. And it's that stability that's reducing the pain. Now, why is the stability there in the first place? Well, here's one potential example. It doesn't mean this is the example for everyone, but one potential example. They've had a history of disc bulge or herniation. They've lost some height to the disc. There is now some laxity in the disc. So the vertebra that sits on top has a little bit more wobble, let's say, which is the unstable part to it. So the passive structures aren't stabilizing it. The ligaments and the disc aren't stabilizing the spine because of that laxity. So what the big three can do is they can just heighten the activity of the muscles, which will stabilize the vertebra in place. So the muscles are essentially picking up the slack that the disc has lost, essentially. So that is one scenario where it could be useful. When might it not be useful? Well, it depends on the back pain. It depends what's driving the pain. If you've got facet joint irritation and that's driving the pain, you may find that heightened activity actually aggravates the facet joints. If the pain is coming from the hip and is going down the leg, again, if you do the big three, it's going to have no effect on what the hips are doing. So again, it's not going to really affect the problem. So we have to understand why the big three work. We have to understand essentially sort of what they do. More examples of when they might not work. When you go into flexion would be another one. So if you're sat down in a flexed posture and that's aggravating the pain, that's not necessarily going to be sorting the problem out. It could be a small piece in the puzzle, but you've got other things like neutral spine, like changing posture as you sit and spreading the load around the torso. So you've got all these other things that the big three can't do. They are just sort of they are one piece of a puzzle. And there may be 5 or 6 pieces that we need for this. And the big three is potentially one of them, but it could be a smaller one. But it could also be a bigger one. So we need to understand when and how to use it. And the only time we can do that is when we use some sort of consultation and assessment to understand the pain. When we come to a greater understanding of the pain, we come to a greater understanding of the solution. That might mean using neutral spine, brace, big three, whatever it needs to be. So it's not just a simple case like too many people suggest, go and do the big three. I've got other videos about the limitations of the big three, which is talking about this. And I would hope that McGil, he may disagree with some of what I'm saying, but I don't think he'd blanket say this is all completely wrong. He's completely misunderstood everything. I don't think that would be the case. So we have to understand why they're useful. One is it just heightens the activity of the muscles to stabilize. The other thing they can do is they can build endurance in the muscles. And because of the exercises that they do it all around the torso as well. So we've got the bird dog, the modified curl up, and the side plank. So it kind of goes all the way around the torso. Now, that doesn't mean that they're the only exercises. As I've mentioned, that book there are beginner, intermediate, and advanced options plus others. So it's very much knowing that they are one piece in the puzzle, and in some respects you can grow out of them as well. So we need to start thinking about the big three differently. We need to start thinking about knowing when to use them, how to use them, where to use them, and what else we can use as we get to the end of their life, if you will. And it's not just a case of once we're doing them, again, we've got to do them for the rest of our lives. I've been doing them for 3 years and they've not worked. I've had people that have mentioned that to me. I've been doing the big 3 and my pain hasn't changed. It's probably because they're not solving the problem of your pain. They are building the endurance and they're activating the muscles, but that's not what's driving your pain. If you can figure out what's driving your pain, sort that out, then you don't need to do the big 3. You probably don't need to do the big 3 anyway. So it's having that sort of understanding. And from particularly the bird dog perspective, it helps build stability. Because you've got all 4s, muscles will relax. You lift, as soon as you lift simultaneously, one knee in the opposite hand from the floor, muscles need to fire. So they build a stability. So you kind of get an initial activation, a bit like a warm-up. You get the endurance, so they're able to do that for a long period of time. And you get the stability, so they fire at the right time as well. So they're not just on all the time. They know when to turn on and when to turn off, or when to heighten and when to dampen their activity. So you get the warm-up, you get the activity, you get the endurance, and you get the intelligence to heighten activity and lower activity. But again, that depends on the person that's doing it. If the person is pain-free and they haven't got it, it's good to have the stability, it's good to have the endurance, because that's the foundation that everything else is built on. But if you're in pain, you've got to understand that they may not be doing a great deal to resolve pain. They're a great way of building the core. They can be useful to resolve pain, but not essential. So we have to come to that understanding with regards to when and how and where and who we use it on. And as I've mentioned before, if you want to start getting involved in more of this, if you've got pain, click the link below, go through to the workshop, learn more about the workshop. It's a standalone course in and of itself, so you will start to be able to learn about your lower back pain and get ideas about how you can solve it. It is also a prerequisite to the group coaching, so if you want to be more specific, go more in depth, learn more about your lower back pain and how to solve it, then go through to the group coaching after you've completed the workshop. And what that will do is set you up to be able to overcome your lower back pain. So to quickly summarise everything that we've talked about. There are big misconceptions about what the McGil Method is. It's not a set of exercises. It's not the big 3. It's an assessment process. It's learning about how to think about pain and rehabilitation. Neutral spine, again, big misconception. It's not about walking around as a robot. There are different rules for a painful spine and a pain-free spine. Pain-free spines have more licenses to do what they want. Painful spines, unfortunately, do need to be managed a little bit differently. The same with bracing. There are different rules for different people, for different spines. And when it comes to the big 3, they aren't necessarily there to reduce pain. They can, but it depends on the pain that they're trying to reduce. So hopefully that gives you a better understanding of the McGil Method. Again, if you want to start working a bit more like everything that I've been talking about, click the link below. If you've just enjoyed the content, hit the like button. If you want to watch more content like this, hit the subscribe button. My name is Chris. I'll speak to you in the next episode.